In most religions on Earth, violence is something that is strictly forbidden, or at least limited in some capacity. And yet, so many have individuals who commit violence in its name, including Christianity, Islam, and Judaism, the three main Abrahamic religions. Despite concepts such as thou shalt not murder, the sanctity of life, and the pursuit of peace being quite straightforward in each religion's sacred texts, many religious extremists commit violence anyway. But why? How would a staunch practitioner of a religion seemingly violate its core tenets? To answer that question, we must delve into each case individually, explaining how scripture and concepts can be reinterpreted to suit extremist worldviews. To be clear, I am referring to extremist groups and their ideologies, not the average Christian, Muslim, or Jew, who I believe should not be categorized alongside violent extremists. But to simplify this video, I will still call extremists by the religion they identify as. I will also mainly focus on modern history, from the 19th century onwards. If you're only interested in a specific topic, there are timestamps below. Modern Christian extremism has justified violence in a multitude of ways, though not every individual or group thinks and acts the same. But generally, in the Western world and specifically the United States, Christian extremists interpret and reinterpret religious scripture to oppose abortion, ethnic minorities, and the LGBTQ, claiming they are enemies to the will of God, which in turn justifies violence. Abortion, for instance, has been the target of violence from Christian extremists for decades. For example, Reverend Michael Bray of the terrorist organization Army of God considers abortion an unforgivable murder of the unborn, the fight to stop it being a holy one. Therefore, according to him, people who enable abortion, like the government and doctors, are justifiable to kill in order to stop this mass murder. Bray has compared abortion to the Holocaust, stating that Christians once stood by as mass murder occurred, and that they could not do so again. Bray has thus continuously promoted violence, applauding the murder of abortion doctor George Tiller in 2009, saying it saved real lives. It should be noted that this isn't representative of the overall pro-life movement, just Christian extremists. Discrimination against LGBTQ people also follows this idea. Christian extremists have long interpreted the religious scripture as being opposed to homosexual and transgender self-conception, which they claim are unholy. For example, Eric Rudolph, aligned with the extremist group Christian Identity in the 1990s, bombed abortion clinics, a lesbian bar, and an event at the 1996 Atlanta Olympics. His justification for this was that secular authorities in the US had promoted atheistic internationalism, or non-traditional gender and sexual norms, which corrupted society and threatened Christianity, violence being necessary to resist. Christian extremists also follow a similar ideology regarding ethnic minorities. Christian nationalism has long been intertwined with Western imperialism such as Manifest Destiny, the American justification for the conquest of native tribes on the continent. This has remained prominent over time, with Christian extremists like those of Christian Identity believing that biblical law only allowed white people to be redeemed through Christ. Other groups like the KKK have also argued that Christian values of protecting family life are under threat by foreigners and non-whites, as well as Catholics and Jews. Though the specific beliefs of these extremists may differ, the common baseline is that American whites are fighting in God's name against non-whites, and that they should stop at nothing to defeat these enemies, including dehumanizing and killing them. Overall, Christian extremists have strongly embraced the culture war, labeling various groups as unholy, at times non-human enemies who want to destroy Christianity and society. By framing them as such, extremists have justified violence, saying it is for the greater good and survival of Christianity. Modern Islamic extremism has justified violence in a multitude of ways, though not every individual or group thinks and acts the same. But generally, Islamic extremist groups interpret and reinterpret Islamic scripture to oppose non-Muslims or Muslims of different sects, especially Westerners, claiming they are enemies of Allah, which in turn justifies violence against them. The first of these characterizations is the kafir, a Quranic term for an unbeliever. However, when applied by extremists, the term is used to broadly label all atheists as unbelievers, Christians as crusaders, and Jews as Zionists, framing these individuals as enemies to Allah's will. These social and political grievances are primarily targeted at the West, seeing it as a source of cultural corruption in Islamic society, influencing closed social behavior and education, which brings the purge of conventional Islam. Secularism is also seen as a Western tool to destroy society. These ideas are very much a reflection of history. For the past few centuries, Western countries, Christian and secular to varying degrees, have colonized and exploited Muslim lands, while also creating the State of Israel. Western military presence in the region has also remained even after the independence of these Muslim states, which is reflected in the ideologies of Muslim terrorist groups. Al-Qaeda, for instance, was shaped by US intervention in the 1991 Gulf War, and thus frames Westerners, atheists, and Christians as enemies or infidels, who must be stopped by jihad. Though originally referring to struggle, jihad has since been reinterpreted in modern times as a holy war by writers such as Sayyid Qutb and Muhammad Abd al-Salam Faraj. Therefore, in the eyes of Islamic extremists, it is just to carry out jihad against Westerners, since they see them as enemies of Allah, as well as sources of corruption and destruction in the Muslim world, which have their origins in truth but are framed in a religious manner. Muslims of different sects are also often targets of violence, coming from a similar place of origin as justifications against non-Muslims. According to Faraj, these Muslims, usually heads of modern states, are called apostates, as they have differed from Islamic law morally and socially, bringing Jahiliyyah, the pre-Islamic period of ignorance. To remove apostasy, all means are justified, including violence. Extremist violence can be enacted in multiple ways, most notably martyrdom, a suicide attack usually involving strapping explosives to oneself and detonating them near the target. Young men are recruited and secretly trained as living martyrs, convinced that their actions are religiously mandated, which is reinforced by statements from extremist scholars which legitimize self-martyrdom and treat it as a guaranteed ticket into heaven. Overall, Muslim extremists have labeled groups such as non-Muslims or Muslims of different sects as unholy forces which bring chaos and destruction in the Muslim world. Tied with historical and political grievances, this has justified violence against a wide variety of people using the principle of jihad, arguing it follows Allah's will. Modern Jewish extremism has justified violence in a multitude of ways, though not every individual or group thinks and acts the same. But generally, Jewish extremism is highly correlated with Zionism, the ideology that supported the creation of a Jewish state, and now supports the State of Israel. Extremists reinterpret scripture to argue that anyone who opposes Israel and its expansion is an enemy, who must be stopped with violence in order to save the Jewish people, as their actions have been mandated by God, who promised Jews the biblical land of Israel. The origins of modern Jewish extremism can be traced back to the 1970s thanks to Rabbi Meir Kahane. Founder of the far-right Koch party in Israel, Kahane pushed for Jewish religious nationalism in the country, fully devoid of secularism. Though a century-old ideology with various viewpoints, many Zionists were secular and advocated for a parliamentary system, while Kahane believed in extreme ethno-nationalism, which included expelling or killing the native population of Palestine. This ideology has resulted in terrorist attacks like the Cave of Patriarchs massacre, where Koch member Barak Goldstein murdered Palestinians to expel them from the region. Though many in the country opposed the terror attack, Israeli politics have since become increasingly tense, where those who oppose the notion of Israeli expansion are labeled a threat, and therefore an enemy. The most notable example of modern Jewish extremist ideology was the assassination of Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin. In 1995, he had begun negotiations with the State of Palestine under the Oslo Peace Accords, which would involve dividing land for peace. However, militant rabbis saw this as anti-Jewish, directly opposing God's will and the right to own Palestinian land. They reinterpreted legal principles such as Din Rodef, which permits killing someone who is trying to kill another. When the prime minister was assassinated, extremist rabbis justified the actions of his killer, arguing that Rabin's push for peace with Palestine had threatened Jewish lives, thus making him a rodef, someone trying to kill someone else. Overall, Jewish extremists label various groups, notably those who oppose claims to the Holy Land, as enemies. These enemies are, by default, inherently threatening to the Jewish people, and thus justifiable to attack under the principle of Din Rodef. Religious extremists have generally framed their beliefs in what is known as cosmic war, a term created by American sociologist Mark Juergensmeyer. To put it simply, cosmic war is how the extremist places themselves in the constant battle between the metaphysical forces of good and evil, on the side of God. Each religious extremist may differ in their specific beliefs, but generally fall into this framework. For Christian extremists, the framing is fairly straightforward. They think that God is judging them and that they can't allow what they perceive as his teachings to be removed from society by an evil enemy. Who this enemy is isn't fully clear, but as we've already established, it can be a variety of groups, including broad terms like elites. They argue that this enemy is well organized and hidden, justifying any violent action done to uncover them, while any retaliation is evidence of persecution. This thinking aligns with anti-governmental beliefs, as they are the institutions that allowed God's values to be taken away, essentially God versus Satan. Muslim extremists follow similar ideas. They treat their sect or interpretation of Islam as the divine one following Allah, fighting against the evil beings that reject him through secularism or opposing beliefs. These enemies allow for the destruction of society and Islam, commonly associated with those labeled kafir, including Westerners. Like Christians and Muslims, Jewish extremists frame their cosmic war in simple terms. Their conflict involving Israeli expansion at the expense of native Palestinians is directly intertwined in this idea. Israeli Jews are good, mandated by God, while those who oppose their expansion are evil and against God as agents of chaos, posing an imminent threat against Jewish people. Though Judaism lacks an external face of evil like in Christianity or Islam, Jewish extremist ideology is still present in this cosmic war framework. It justifies attacks and terrorism against the forces which stop Israelis from following the word of God, as in claiming what they believe is their religiously mandated land. With this framework, the extremists can therefore justify violence, framing groups they dislike as enemies part of the cosmic war. Cosmic war is absolute, a fight for the soul of the world that makes compromise impossible, and violence the way it shall end. Those who die or kill for this cause are martyrs. Thank you for watching, and a special thank you to my channel members. Ahi13099. Click the link on screen for more. If you want to support the channel, you can like and hype the video as well as subscribe. If you want your name here, you can also become a member by clicking the join button below. Thank you.